So welcome to the latest episode of the MoneyWise UK podcast. I'm your host, George, and today I'm delighted to be joined by Henry Rossiter of Belmont Estate. Now, I was introduced to Henry by two mutual friends who both said the same things. You need to have him on the podcast. And it was interesting because once I looked at the website for Belmont Estate, I really understood why. It's located just outside of Bristol and it was brought back to life by the Rossiter family in 2012. Now, what really stood out to me was the estate's focus on sustainability, community and education, and their values that kind of feel more relevant now than ever before. So today we're going to explore how Belmont Estate are doing things differently and why that matters. I'm just going to sort of start by obviously saying welcome to Henry. Absolutely delighted to have him here. Really with an easy question, I guess, which is perhaps, Henry, you could start by giving us a little bit about your background and how you came to be involved with Belmont Estate.
Of course. Well, George, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm really looking forward to the conversation today. My history starts not with Belmont, actually, and when I was a lot younger. At the age of about 3 years old, I didn't have much of a say in the matter, so I was dragged away from London to the countryside to a place called to Churchill, which is sort of in Somerset. Then I made friends with a local dairy farmer who slowly sort of brought me into the more conventional forms of agriculture, mainly in the dairy industry. But it was that sparked my interest in the whole food production and farming and nature matter. Eventually, my family moved house again when I was about 12 years old, and Philip's departing words were, "Henry, promise me one thing, that you will never be a farmer." And so I totally ignored that, and eventually went on to the Agricultural University in Cirencester and studied food production. And it was at that point that when it was around, actually, in 2012, and my family had the opportunity to start purchasing parts of the estate that was originally sold off from the Tinsfield lot when Lord Wraxall passed away in 2002. In those, what ended up being sort of a following 12 years, piecing parts of it as the opportunities arose. It was probably around 2018 when the family and I, we started to sort of to set our ambition and objectives. I'm sure we'll go into it later, how we wanted to become more than sort of just a venue as such. But it was in 2020 when I left hospitality, and at that point we were really starting to be quite interesting as such. It was the start of our journey. And of course, that's a fantastic time, March 2020, to leave hospitality. And so that was, it just so happens to be when I started working with the family.
So is the Belmont Estate then, is it kind of a family business? Is that how you would see it? It's kind of everyone together kind of building that future for the estate?
Very much so. So, in my direct family as such, there are five of us. My mother and my father, who are very much involved with the day-to-day running of the business alongside myself. And then I have two younger brothers, both of which have shown signs of being interested, but they're currently, one of them is working in the finance world, and another one is still at university. But I'm sure in time that they'll slowly work their way back.
And in terms of, it'd be quite interesting because you talked about being in hospitality, and obviously you went to Cirencester, and by the sounds of it, the kind of transformation of Belmont has kind of happened over time. I don't know whether it, obviously you started buying parts of it in 2012, and then obviously you started being involved in 2020. Could you just perhaps just take us along that journey as to sort of how it's changed, I guess, because that would then come on to some of the sort of key challenges that you faced and the opportunities that you sort of see into the future.
Yeah, of course. So in terms of the transformation, it initially started because my family had always wanted a little bit of land of their own to effectively do what we do now. We've always wanted that opportunity to connect with nature and have that opportunity to grow your own food and effectively live what I suppose many would call the good life. And as time went on, we then realised quite quickly that the running costs of not even of what it was a project back then, but just sort of a facility that it is a lot higher than many people realise. And so we started sort of continuing on the good life expansion, and we started to do meat boxes, and we did firewood, and we made our own charcoal, and we sold all of those, and we had the Belmont brand behind it. And whilst that was it was a lot of fun, we still produce a little bit of charcoal, and we produce our own meat as well today, and we're very proud of what we do. Unless you're operating at such a vast scale, it simply doesn't make financial sense. And so what we ended up doing was actually having to look at the way that we ran. And so we then started doing other forms of hospitality. And so we did sort of an educational piece in terms of butchery classes, and we wanted to connect people with nature through sort of yoga. And we realized that actually what we had done is become effectively just a venue. And whilst we had these beliefs as a family, and wanted to really look at the way that we connect people and inform them around nature decline and where their food comes from, we weren't doing that as well as we thought we could in terms of being a normal venue as such. There was, of course, the finance in the background as such, and that's one of the things that we were always aware of. The cost of running things only ever seems to increase. And so we're always aware of those sorts of things. The opportunities, I think, that we're now we have identified and continue to arise and expand is looking at the roles that estates and landowners have to play in the challenge of nature restoration, as well as the opportunities to sequester carbon. Obviously, the climate crisis is very much upon us. I believe most people are pretty aware. We have that chance to welcome people and talk and educate, connect, and increase that understanding. And a lot of that can be done through natural capital, but of course there is food. As a society, we need to eat, and so we need to look at the ways that we produce food, and rather than have that disconnect that we have where many people go to a supermarket and it seems to be beautifully presented on the shelf. It was muddy once upon a time, and we need to see what grows when rather than it all being imported from Kenya or wherever your tender stem might come from.
I guess I kind of wanted to sort of jump a few questions that I had in my mind. And one of the things is because of where we're talking there is you've got this kind of, how do I describe it? It's almost like this challenge is that, and as you've come across is it's all about well, I say it's all about business, but in a way it has to be about business because, as you say, is running an estate like Belmont is not going to be cheap. And it's probably not easy. And in a way, you can almost feel that there could have been more sort of straightforward or commercial paths that you could have taken. So, I mean, you talked about, scaling up and maybe kind of, I don't know, making it more of a venue. So, kind of why I guess some people say, well, and we will talk about the environment bit because I think that is the heart of all of this, but I guess why? I mean, why bother? Because ultimately, if you're looking at an estate and you're running it like a business, I guess why do you choose this route? What do you hold as most important? Because I guess there could be different ways that you could make your money if that was, I guess, if that's really, really important.
Yeah, there's so many questions within that question. In short, yes, that there were other opportunities to do so, and some estates go down the route of development. They create more housing because it pays well. Others become wedding venues because the margin on weddings is rather impressive. But for us, we are possibly stubborn. We wouldn't want anything too easy. We like to, as a family, drive change, make a difference, and feel like we're possibly sometimes going against the grain. And so what we ended up as such settling on these three pillars because as an estate we employ, I think it's around 32 individuals. And so that's quite a reasonable salary cost that therefore you have to cover. But then there's also further things that you do with contractors, and there's the buildings you need to maintain and the land, and also and obviously insurance. And so you have to run it as a business. I think that's why we're seeing many farms and estates who sadly are not in a position to continue. And it's deeply upsetting. But we're having conversations with lots of estates and landowners at the moment who are looking at those next steps. I met with an estate yesterday who has been around for 300 years, and they've just finished their 100-year business plan, and they're looking to extend it to another, into a 300-year business plan, because they said we want to be here for the next 300 years. And so I suppose with us, we maybe did it in a slightly back to front way, in that we looked at what we're passionate about, and as a family, the three pillars I mentioned earlier are climate, nature, and community, and we link that experience and food and connection opportunity through there. My father and I very much food focused, as you need nature to produce food. That's, at the end of the day, what food is. Food is various parts of nature. And my mother is very much on the sustainability or the sustainable production method of that, but also in terms of the connection and the educational piece. In fact, it was her idea. And so I think because those were areas that were passions of ours, we then thought, well, how can we find a way to monetize this? How can we find a way to bring people together over the things that we enjoy, to find a financially sustainable model to hopefully create? And then if it's successful, then we'd love to roll it out and encourage others to do very similar.
Your background, you said you were in hospitality. Do your parents have a background in this area to be able to do this? Or is it just something that, as you say, it's something that you're, as a family, you're very passionate about, something you always wanted to do, and you've just thrown yourself into it?
So the short answer is no. My father had an engineering business for pretty much all of his working career, and my mother, whilst she's a fantastic cook or chef, and bearing in mind that she has many dietary issues or challenges, she does remarkably well to cook for everyone. And so whilst they don't have a background in hospitality, they're very experienced in food focused and about bringing people together. And so I think with that, it sort of made perfect sense, and that we always enjoy having those opportunities to effectively sit around a long table and make those memories that we all hopefully have. The memories where you've got a long table and it was maybe only meant to be a lunch between 1 and 2, but at 6 o'clock you're still there. You're not really sure which wine glass is yours, but it doesn't really matter. And those are the summer evenings, and hopefully the winter ones cuddled around the fire, is the ones that we all remember in such good favour.
And it's funny because when you talk about that, it takes me back to I remember staying with a friend in France, and having a lunch in France, and that went on from, I don't remember what time it finished, but it was late on into the evening. So it's quite interesting when you say that, and it kind of takes me onto this kind of community bit. I want to get back to the nature bit. It just feels right to ask around this, is that community seems to be very much at the heart of Belmont. And it'd be interesting to, from what you've just sort of said there, I think it is really important to you. But I guess it's, what does that actually look like in practice and kind of day to day on the estate?
So for me, community breaks down, whilst it's one of the pillars, it actually breaks down into sort of 3 categories within it, in probably how we do it as our offering as such. One of them is our volunteers, which we earlier experienced. But in terms of the volunteering program as such, again, that actually breaks down into 2 subsets. But we, in 2021, I want to say it was, we launched a community volunteering program based on looking at monitoring nature levels within our wilding project. And so we say this a lot, so I can say it here. So we were initially quite skeptical about it. From history, our previous estate manager saw volunteering as a vast tea and biscuit expenditure, and often a job that was only half done, which then he had to do again. And so we were a little bit nervous about that, but we really wanted to interact with everyone around us and see if there were any people who were as keen about nature as we were. In short, there was. We've been really lucky to now have 15 species leads, all of which are dedicated to their work and do it in such great depth and detail, looking at everything from birds to bats to moths to butterflies to ground nesting birds. And it's been amazing, the data that has been recorded. We're now just over 300 volunteers, all from the local, or mostly from the local community. There is quite a few who've signed up from areas such as Milton Keynes and Portsmouth, but whilst they are on the list, we do try to encourage them not necessarily to attend as much from a carbon point of view, unless they do happen to be in the area. But the data that they have collected is just remarkable. March this year, we recorded our 2,200th species, up from a baseline of, I think it was just over just below 400. And so we're seeing bird species that not only have not been seen in North Somerset for the last 60 years, but some of which that have never been recorded in North Somerset. And so the data that they collect is just fascinating. In terms of the other side of volunteering, in our corporate partnership offering that we do, we also include opportunities for employees of these firms to come out, connect with nature, but also work in the communities that we reside in. So we've got a good relationship with North Somerset Council and Bristol City Council, as well as the parks within the areas. And we often go out and we help with local schools or in the parks or litter picking and all those sorts of things that should just be done, that we should be able to have the time to do so. And so the companies that we work with are very generous in terms of delivering that. The other thing that we do is our Nature Connection program. So currently funded by the family, but slowly moving into this sustainable funding model through the partnership program. We welcome thousands of individuals per annum, totally free of charge. So much so to the point that we've actually got a lovely partnership with Toyota, who have supplied us a minibus for the next 2 years, totally on them. They've even put the charging point in. And so with that, we are able to go out and collect people who might struggle as such to come here. But we also work with schools, we work with universities, we work with many adults as well through things such as green prescribing, but also just the chance to come here and connect. We also host a variety of walks, which is mainly hosted by Martin Williams, who weirdly was my old geography teacher, but is now our head of Nature Connection, and he does an excellent job at going out and talking with businesses, but also welcoming the community here who either want to learn more about what we're doing or want to learn more about the subject as such. And it's just a really lovely 2-3 hour walk around the Wilding projects, learning about what we're doing. And then finally, the one thing that we've touched a lot on earlier, but I haven't mentioned yet, is obviously food. And so we're in the process of launching more of these walks, these talks, but also a sustainability feast series that we want to bring people down to our Wilding project to eat together, to make friends as such with the people that you'll be sat next to through no choice of your own, and have that chance to dine. We also, of course, it's important to try and live this as much to day as you can. And so in terms of those who do work on the estate, we encourage everyone to eat together as well, outside as well, if possible.
And I guess that's one of the themes that I've got here is about this reconnection with nature, and kind of not just as a nice idea, but as something that genuinely improves lives and well-being. And I think in our busy lives, it appears our lives are busy because we're always connected, aren't we? And therefore people do struggle. There's no kind of getting away from that, is there? So I guess, and it's interesting when you talk about the community and eating together and people eating together, and kind of, you've said that a few times, it's about, bringing people to the table, people being there. So it'd be really interesting to kind of explore that a little bit more, that reconnection with nature. It just seems, I guess what you said before is it's almost like going against the grain, isn't it? It's that you've come up with this, you've put this all together, and it's something that can improve lives. It'd be interesting to kind of get your thoughts around that, and perhaps examples of how you've seen that actually play out.
Very much so. So I think in terms of the disconnect that we're on, as you previously alluded to, is the fact that we are so easily contactable through these little digital things that sit in our pockets, and therefore we never actually have the chance to properly disconnect. And we saw that through lack of connection, especially over COVID, how much damage it did to people, and finding that chance to get out and walk in nature and breathe. And I think that the thing that we all often forget is actually the human race is part of nature. We are part of Mother Nature, and we often seem to separate ourselves from it. And so the chance to walk around barefoot on some cold earth is actually really quite refreshing. To walk around in trees boosts your NK cells, which is a natural sort of boost in your white blood cell count that fights off potential cancers. And so nature is so powerful. And so, but because people have missed the chance to do that, because in short, I think we have our priorities placed incorrectly, and I'm not always not guilty of this myself. And so I think we almost need to find that chance to come together, and we've seen it work as such in all sorts of ways. And one of the interesting ones is on multiple occasions now. I think we've probably had 5 vegans on separate occasions who have come to the estate. They've done a walking tour. They've met the animals. They've previously asked for the vegan option in terms of dining, and they've said, "Can I eat meat?" And the reason that they feel that they can is often because they don't want to eat meat because they don't agree with the welfare standards that the majority of our food is produced in, and they actually struggle to believe sometimes in terms of these certification bodies that actually the farmer is doing what it says on the tin. And I think that's really sad that we've lost that trust in what is effectively something that we should be trusting, because these people they've been out, they've seen it, they've touched it, they feel as if they can, and it's lovely to see. In terms of I think probably in terms of the nature connection point of view, we've had some really, really lovely areas. And one of them is, it sort of splits between children and adults. And the children, we've done a lot of work recently with refugees and young carers. And there was a lovely little boy who came from, I can't remember which country, but somewhere in the Middle East, a war-torn country. And he had never seen running water before. And so he came down to the river at Watercress, and he very slowly got into it. I wouldn't have got into it because it was in November, but he slowly lowered himself into the water and loved it. The sheer joy, as actually he then reclined back to then float in the river and sort of gently float downstream as he yelled out, "I'm flying." Made many of the connection leads here actually well up to an extent. It's a really emotional thing to see such untampered with joy. An experience I had in the summer as well was when, again, another refugee, a mother with her children, she came up to Julie, one of our connection leads, and said, "Can I speak to the owners?" And I just so happened to be down here. And Julie said, "Would you mind coming?" And I said, "Yeah, of course, more than happy to, have a conversation." And I'm normally quite tough, but even I found it quite hard to hold back the tears. As she came up to me, she hugged me and she held my hand and looked me in the eye and said that she never thought she'd be able to smell a wood smoke from a point of safety again. And when you're hearing things like that, you just realise how privileged you are, in whatever state you are in the UK, really, just to have that chance to walk and breathe and not be nervous at the fact that a bomb's going to go off in your village. And I think it's really incredible to be able to offer that opportunity and see the joy that nature can bring in such a simple way. We're not, putting on any form of entertainment as such within this project. It's purely, there's some trees, there's some grass, there's a river. And because I think the human race, we're told to grow up, we're told to be mature. But actually, if you look at children, they will find their own way to entertain themselves when they're just put into a field. They'll run, they'll play with sticks, they'll climb trees, they'll get muddy. We've had nature connection sessions where it's purely, they jump in a puddle for 2 hours. And there's like 20 or 30 children just jumping in puddles. And it's so lovely to see the joy that it brings, and also the playground rules as such that seem to totally change. Children who would never talk to other children within classes because they were deemed as uncool. But suddenly one of the little kids will know something more about nature than the other, and they become the popular one. And it's so lovely to see.
And I think that is, I think I'm very much guilty of that, is that like when we were younger, I'm obviously a lot older than you, but when we were younger, that connection with nature was very much there, and kind of understanding the different trees or the different birds or the animals and so forth. Whereas probably now we almost take it for granted, don't we? We walk down the street, we don't notice what's around us. I guess that's where this reconnection really comes in, doesn't it?
Very much so. I think it's so lovely to hear you looking back to your childhood. I think it's a shame that it's your childhood and not last week, but it's something that I think we take for granted because we hope or we believe that it will always be there. The chance, the opportunity to go for a half an hour walk in a woodland is so much more rewarding than we ever give it actual recognition for. There was a study done. There's actually a fantastic book called The Nature Fix. I can't remember the author, but she, I think, did her doctorate in the States and a lot of research in Japan. And I highly recommend it to people just looking to find some more sort of scientific data around the whole subject. But the study that made it come up was there was some research done on 200 students in a college in the States, of which 100 of them were told that they were going to be walking around in underground tunnels, and 100 of them were told that they were going to be going outdoors and going into the woodland. And they were all asked to pre-rank how they thought they were going to feel. And then after the experience, they were then asked to rank at how they actually felt. And it was consistent across the board that everyone who went into the tunnels all overestimated how they thought they were going to enjoy it, and everyone who went into nature all underestimated it. And it just shows that actually it's such a simple fix to just put a little smile on your face, hopefully for the day ahead.
You talked about the refugees, and I know that you talked about this bus that you've got, or this coach or minibus.
Yes.
In terms of, for someone who's kind of listening, or who could be listening to this, and they live in a city, and it's very easy within a city to, I guess, not connect with nature. I know that there is nature around. In Bristol, I'm always amazed that, like, if I cycle in, sometimes you see a fox, and it's those little things that sometimes we miss. And I guess that's, someone listening, they may live in a city, they don't feel they're close to nature. Can you sort of, do you do work with that kind of inner city, bringing people in and helping, I guess it's probably children, but maybe it's adults, kind of just have that connection with the natural world, that maybe, when they go back to their home in the city, actually they see what's around them in a different way?
Very much so. So I think there's almost two answers to that question. One of them is yes, a lot of the schools and universities, especially that we work with, are actually mainly inner city based. A vast number of our visitors have never actually touched real grass before. And I think in terms of, it does create this awareness that actually nature is there. The London Council at one point, or London councils at one point, were tarmacking right up to the edges of trees because they found it annoying that grass was growing on the pavements. I went to a recent conference that said they were now stopping that and actually reversing it because they realised that, one, it was affecting natural drainage, but two, it is actually a habitat. And I think in terms of ways to sort of to bring nature in, I think I know Bristol very well, and so therefore, the Downs is a fantastic place to be able to sit and appreciate and breathe. I know you've got a hustle and bustle around you, but it's better than being in the city centre. There's also, do things such as, I was actually walking along the River Avon yesterday evening as such. And the bird song was just remarkable. I couldn't help myself but take it in. And it was so pleasant, it was almost intrusive. I really think that there are some really easy wins in that everyone thinks that, well, no, nature's just in the countryside. It's not. It's found ways to adapt and ways to live with us. In fact, we've named a lot of our nature after how we live as well. You think of the house martin, the barn owl, the field mouse. They're not really. A field is a man-made construction, as is a house, as is a barn. It's all those sorts of, the hedgehog as well. They would have lived before we created these habitats. I think there's also the things of actually just hug a tree. I know that sounds really hippie, but it can actually be really quite pleasant. I have done it. I will hold my hand up. And then there's also the thing that, just having something green and real in your home, your office, anywhere to bring a form of a natural living species into your environment. I think it's just really, really is good. Maybe you might not have the opportunity to do so, but jump on the internet, use your phone to read about nature, see what's going on, be inspired, and become a voice. Nature affects you every day, even if you haven't noticed or thought about it before. And the things in your home, the potential pills that you might need to consume, the food that you will eat, it is all derived from nature in one way or another. And the other thing is, just come to us, come and see us.
Yeah. So I've got to ask you, before I go on to the environmental bit,
Yes.
hugging a tree, what is that about? Because I am down the line of, that just sounds strange. I mean, I've got a tree that I'm looking at the moment, and I can't
You're
imagine
eyeing it up,
hugging
aren't
it.
you? I think it's one of those things that trees are a remarkable things. They're all connected throughout the soil. It would have escaped me now that the term I'm trying to use, hopefully it'll come back, but every single tree is all connected throughout the underground network as such, and they're able to move nutrition between each other at the point that a tree is struggling. They are They are a community and we are a community. And so are your pets. If you've got cats, you've got dogs, you've got guinea pigs, whatever. They are a community too. But we still find joy in not only hugging each other, but we find joy in hugging our pets. Having that connection and that opportunity, I think, can only strengthen you. Even if a tree at the end of the day is a little bit cold, there's still something fun about it. The tree that you're eyeing up after this, give it a cuddle. See, let me know how it goes.
Okay, that's my challenge then. After this podcast, is to go and hug a tree. Okay, I'll go and talk to my tree. So I'm going to talk about environment, and don't take this wrong, but I guess that a lot of people that when we talk about environment, particularly, and I don't want to go into politics, but it's almost like there's a pushback, isn't there? To some extent, we know that things have to be done, but then there's going to be pain in doing it, and it's too expensive, and therefore kind of gets to that point of what's the point? And I know that you talk about biodiversity net gain, rewilding, conservation. Can you just talk about really, can you make a difference? Does it matter? Please, anyone listening to this, don't shoot me. I'm just asking the question. I mean, does it matter? I mean, could you just say, actually, it's just a term. It's not going to make a difference. So could you just sort of talk about what these sort of terms mean and how it will change things?
So I think that the most important thing is probably to start with, and as you say, you're just the messenger. But I think if people have that mentality of, am I really going to make a difference, and all that sort of negative mindset, then no, you won't. Because if you don't do anything, then nothing will change. And I think it's taking those easy wins. If you have a garden, don't mow all of it and let your hedges grow out a little bit more. If you have a hedge, for example, if you do have a field, let your hedges grow up. There's no reason why you wouldn't let your hedge grow up. And it creates that extended habitat. Leave the berries on the bushes as such at the time of winter, because that's what birds need before they go into hibernation or before they start their travels down south. And so there's all sorts of really easy things that we can do, which isn't just saving water and ensuring that you buy the correct amount of food. And if you do, put it into food waste and sell by dates and all those sorts of things. There's so many things that I know you go, it's a lot of effort, but you start somewhere and then eventually it becomes habits, and then it isn't effort. It's just how you work day to day. I think that the reason that we're in this mess as such at the moment, so a fun little statistic, is that out of the 240 countries and territories in the world, England comes in at 232 in terms of biodiversity. So we're the eighth most least biodiverse country in the world, which is quite depressing, really. And so we have this whole focus on conservation in the UK, and fundamentally, conservation hasn't worked. That's why we're in this position. A very well-known individual around nature, I don't know how much this was said in confidence, did say to me, he said, conservation has failed, and that's why we've got a problem. He said, we need to regenerate, to rewild, to bring it back. Conservation is about freezing something in time, and it often focuses on one or two species or habitat types, often to the detriment of others. And so I think actually the terms around rewilding, which will then link into biodiversity net gain, is actually quite exciting. And I think it's allowing nature to bring back those natural processes that we've stopped. We spray our fields, we cut our hedges at times that birds need the food. We do all these things to work against nature in the hope that we can make it work. But then you just end up with a larger human or mechanical input that only actually costs the environment rather than the consumer, because we don't account for the cost of nature within the things that we do. But that's where biodiversity net gain comes in. And so for those who don't know about biodiversity net gain, it's all part of the environmental law. It came into force February last year, and it's effectively all about adding a net gain of 10% to your development. So if you're building a home and you take out a tree, you have to put 1.1 trees back. That's very simplistic terms, but it hopefully gives you the idea. And so, to an extent, and very high level overview, you could argue that developments are now nature positive, which is something I never thought I'd say, and that there's lots of caveats and potentials to shoot me down on that. But they are looking at the ways that they integrate with nature and how you can actually have a nature positive industry. I think that probably the challenge around it is actually nature is a really hard thing to quantify. It's so varied, and so therefore it makes it so challenging to actually account for. But rewilding is something that is becoming more trendy as such. I think it's got a lot of potential, and that there are a lot of people who are nervous, who are worried, who say, but if you rewild, then you won't have enough food for us as a race. We're not self-sufficient as a country as it is, and so we need to look at that and how can we become more self-sufficient. The majority of our agricultural land within the UK is actually mainly focused on growing crops for animals, and so I'm personally against having that feeding input. I think cattle can graze, ours do, all year round outside on grass. They aren't fed any additional inputs. We don't mow, we don't take silage. We have all these things that allow them to be pretty much natural, and then we play the role of the wolf. And and I know everyone preaches that you just need to eat less meat of better quality. It's better for you, it's better for the environment, it's better for your diet. Yes, it's more expensive, but if the nutritional value of that food product is higher, then I don't see why you wouldn't contemplate it, really. I could keep going, but I'm conscious of time, so
Yeah.
that's
And I
hopefully
guess,
got.
yeah, and I guess that comes back to what you were saying earlier of, because I was trying to get my head around um, where you were talking about your volunteers and how they're seeing that change in species that you're seeing and so forth. And I guess it's about, if we go back to if we go back to nature, if that's the right word, please correct me if I'm wrong. If we go back to nature and we encourage, I went past a development in Bristol the other day, which they're building some flats, and I noticed all around there is they're putting trees down, which must be kind of all this the sort of net gain area that they're talking about. And I think that's it's almost about opening our eyes again to what's outside, what's around us, and encouraging, looking at people who, as you say, where they cut their grass and they leave a little bit that's their sort of wild patch, and
Yeah,
what that can create, and it can create so much positivity, can't it, within that. And I think the other thing that struck me was this thing that you were saying about bringing things back to its natural habitat. Almost is like, if you've got cows that are grazing rather than feeding them, then
yes,
that's the natural way of doing it, isn't it? It's
exactly that.
encouraging that and bringing that back. It's interesting to kind of, yeah, just almost like bringing us back to where we should be. Yeah.
Yeah,
uh,
it's a
um,
reverse of the mechanization and industrialization of agriculture that realistically kicked off after the Second World War, because all vast chemical companies that originally created products to kill people then went, well, actually, we're quite good at killing things. Let's kill nature.
yeah.
And we realized that when we had a food shortage, we could create more food because we were ridding of the problems, and therefore we could get out of rationing.
Mm,
And it made sense. They ripped out hedgerows, they made bigger fields because the machinery was larger. It all made perfect sense back then. But we now produce enough food for everyone to have a diet of, it's over 3,000 calories per capita in the world. So
mm,
therefore, everyone's obese. So we've got awful distribution networks and the wrong sort of idea of consumption. And that's, I think, where it's all gone a little bit wrong. But I think in terms of bringing the nature back, the most important thing, and also in terms of not producing food. So whilst what we're doing is the far extreme um, in terms of very low stocking densities, we don't have any form of arable crop. We are seeing the return of pollinators. And I think a lot of people will go, no, there's loads of pollinators around. They are one essential. They are responsible between 75 and 90% of the main food groups that we rely on as a race, that without insects, they wouldn't grow. And so if you think back to when, I'm going to say 10 years ago, hopefully everyone was still driving, being driven around 10 years ago. And those summer evenings driving through the English countryside, possibly on the way to Devon or something along those lines, and you used to have to effectively use your windscreen wipers to clear the insects off. Your number plate would be littered with insects, sometimes so much so that you couldn't even see. That doesn't happen anymore. These pollinators have gone, and it's not as in they've gone to the country next door. We killed them, and without that them around, we will have a serious problem very, very soon, because people start wars over water and minerals, but they definitely will start wars over food. Not only external wars, but internal too. And so we need to look from a food security point of view on the fact that the pollinators having these habitats, and we see ourselves as almost like a hub and spoke effects in terms of almost like a bicycle wheel, in that our wilding project will be the centre, and the pollinators will live and breed here, but they will go out to these animal farms who actually surround us. They will pollinate the wheat, the maize, the barley, and they will come back. Hopefully, it's for safety as such if they make it. But in doing so, you will actually secure food production going forward, and hopefully only increase it.
And that's really, really interesting. I've just got the vision of cleaning the number plates and everything. I'm conscious I've taken a lot of your time, so I'm going to give you 3 kind of quick fire questions, well, hopefully. So, number 1, what makes you happy?
If I had to go for my top 3, I would say friends coming together over food, often barbecued, and consuming possibly too much natural wine. My dog, who is currently sat next to me, who actually has been quiet, which I'm very happy about, and ballooning, which is a little bit rogue. I recently took up being a balloon pilot.
I could explore that separately, but let's go on to the next question. If you weren't doing this, what might you have done instead?
Oh, that's a really good question. I don't know, to be honest. I've always had food in my mind since the age of 15. I've always said I want to work in foods. I'd probably have to go down being a chef, or alternatively, something that I've been more awakened to recently, some form of sustainable investment and the opportunity to do good with someone else's money.
And then where do you see yourself and Belmont, say, in 10 years, 20 years' time?
World domination. I would probably, I'd love to see Belmont expand, and I would hope that I am still within the family business. It depends what they think of the podcast when they hear it. In terms of Belmont, I've got a real growth ambition, not only through our own growth, but also through partnership. We're really enjoying working and speaking with other farms, estates, landowners, in how that they can follow our vision and share in this great joy. And so that's probably my slight cop-out answer, in that I just want to keep going.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your time. And I kind of scribbled lots and lots of things down, and kind of the community side. I love that vision of the table and people coming together at that table. I think it's really interesting around the biodiversity net gain. I think just learning about the way of bringing nature back. Got that vision of the insects on the car, and there's just so much more. I've probably picked the wrong ones, but there's always little ones that kind of stick in your mind. So I just want to say thank you. Honestly, it's been really fascinating just coming into that whole world of what you're doing, kind of really feeling your passion behind it as well. That comes through all of everything you've said. And honestly, anyone who's listening today, I'd say have a look at the website, which is Belmont Estate, and you can learn more about what they're doing, and certainly connect with them. If you've enjoyed this episode, then please rate, follow, comment, spread the word, and thanks for listening. And thank you again, Henry, for your time today.
George, again, thank you very much. And it's worth just saying our website will be updated very soon. Thank you again. We'll speak again soon.
Thank you very much.